Okay, now we're on. Well, I appreciate the offer to come and talk with you this morning, or this afternoon, I guess. I did meet David about a month ago, and the following night, then my father passed. It was October 29th that he passed. Now, David's asked me to talk about myself and all the bio behind that, my career path, my walk with God, and the children's home, and gave me a 30-minute time limit. So the children's home would take me a lot longer than that. So I'm just going to touch a little bit about, but then I really want to spend the time sharing with you about the Wichita Children's Home and the blessing that we have in our community of how we take care of abused, abandoned, neglected, homeless, and exploited youth in our community. He stated, and I just reported, my father passed October 29th, and that hit me to the very core of who I am. I do believe that there is the kingdom of God, and that's where he's at, and he was a very strong believer. But my personal message is, my father was the first man in the state of Kansas to win custody of children because my biological mom decided, well, I kind of helped her decide. I burnt their house down, huffing a cigarette lighter one day. Wow. And she decided after the insurance payment was that she would leave us and go away. Well, then she came back and filed for custody of my 3 sisters, but she didn't file for custody of me, and in the court records, I'm known as the devil child. And so my father didn't know what to do, but on Friday from 5 o'clock to 5 o'clock on Sunday, I would get to go spend the time with my father in his garage apartment that he rented. And he would make me banana pancakes and take me to Joyland. And boy, when I was 7 years old, I had the enrichment of being alone with my daddy. And he taught me such valuable lessons. In fact, for the day that I burnt the house down, the firemen were going to say, young lady, you know, you need to go to jail. And my dad arrives from working at Boeing, and he arrives and he scoops me up in his arms and he asked if I was okay. And that was the first lesson that I learned about unconditional love. And since that March, through what he went through, he taught me very valuable lessons in my life. So he went to the courts, and in and out of the courts, he finally won custody of 4 little girls. And my mom was the first woman in the state of Kansas to be unfit to take care of children. But I never felt unloved or cared for or anything like that because I had my dad. So when he died, it just touched me to the core of my being because I don't know how to walk without him. But he sends me signs every day that he's with me, and he was so proud of the work that I do with the children, that he's there supporting me. And so even though the community, or the time of the year is one that we're blessed to have, when we talk about Christmas and stuff, I did feel congruent with what's happening. But the other night I was driving home from work, and there was a song that came on the radio, and it was one I had never heard, and I'm sure most of you have heard it, but I hadn't. And it was A Baby Changes Everything. Wow, what a powerful song. So I went home and I found it on YouTube, and I looked at it. It was a biblical story of Mary and everything. But then as you look at a YouTube video, they have those related messages, and there's one that says, "There's no room." And so I clicked on that one and watched that video, and those storylines are those vulnerable individuals, the seniors, homeless, children. And it became very clear to me that the blessings that we get to do at the children's home is the modern day stable. There's no room, you come here and we will provide care and love to you. And so that refocused me in on the blessing of the time and the season to be at Christmas, and to go back and have the blessing of being able to be the voice of the children in our community. The Wichita Children's Home has been with us in our community for 128 years. It started out as a gentleman's wife died in childbirth, and he didn't know what to do with the children. So he went to Miss Garver and asked, "Will you take care of my 7 children while I go look for work, and I will give you a mighty good cow?" And so she agreed to it. He went, found work, found a new wife, came back and got the children. And but since that, in the Wichita community, the Children's Home, and the name's never changed, the Wichita Children's Home has been here taking care of children. The strong leadership throughout that 128 years means we've been flexible. It really started out with adoptions,
with children that were in needing of families. In fact, when I first got there, I was looking in the matron books, and Carrie Nation had written in that there was a family in western Kansas that needed a child, and then right out to the side it said supplied. Well, we don't make notations like that now with things we do. I am a psychiatric nurse practitioner specialized in children's psych and mental health. For 20 years, I have been at Wichita State University. I taught in the School of Nursing. And then for 9.5 years, I was the WSU Alumni Association. And I love nursing, I love healthcare. And so why did I go to the Alumni Association? You know, as you age, you figure out why God puts you on the path that you do. For 9.5 years, I was able to meet some pretty powerful individuals in our community, and now I need them. And so I call those chakras up and say, I need your help because I have children over here. For the 2 times that the Board of Trustees, when they decided to make a move in their CEO position, came and spoke to me about coming over to the children's home to accept that CEO position, I said no, because I was really happy, because my husband's also the voice of the chakras. So if you're a chakra fan and you know Mike Kennedy, that's my husband. So if I am the WSU Alumni Association planning the Final Four party and my husband's the voice of the chakras, you can see how that really worked very well for us. So for me to step out there, Matt, oh, okay, we're going to have some stress in the family as I do one thing and you're doing another. The 3rd time they offered and said, this is our last request for you to consider, I went over to the new land. We have built a beautiful facility out on 37th Street. And I sat in quiet prayer with God, and I said, what am I supposed to do? And it became very loud that I was supposed to go to the children's home. So I had a conversation. I said, all right, God, this is what you're going to do. Because I used to have a private practice, and you absorb so many traumas of children, very much like what you do in hospice care and what all of you do as you do your ministry. Sometimes you hear some of the worst things and you wonder, how can people do that to people? And I thought, I can't do this again, because on the weekends when I was doing my practice, I wanted to wear earrings that said out of order, and I know you've been there too. So I said, well, then you have to walk with me, because I can't do this alone. And so you need to give me a God wink every day and let me know that you're there with me. And so this is my routine. When I leave my job, leave the children's home, when I put my hands on the steering wheel, I reflect on my day and I look for my God winks, because then I'm prepared to go back the next day, because I understand that I'm not doing it alone, and my staff, 108, we're not doing it alone. We have the privilege of doing that. And so today I have to tell you, when I leave work today and I reflect on my day, I am going to consider you a God wink, because I've met some people. Because when I share the story of the children's home, and you've heard it, you can't help but keep us in your prayers, and even you might have an opportunity to help us. And I want to say that from the first of this, thank you very much. The children's home. Anytime that you hear a child's been placed in police protective custody, they automatically come to the Wichita Children's Home. We have that contract with our county, and in the majority of the counties and states in the United States, they go to the police station and they tell that horrific story. Not here in Sedgwick County. They come to the children's home, and where they're automatically received with love, care, in a beautiful, beautiful place. And so with that contract, that child can stay at the children's home for up to 72 hours, excluding weekends and holidays, while they do that investigation to find out, is this child being abused, neglected, has it been abandoned, is it being exploited? And then they'll make a determination. A lot of those times, those children will go back to their home with family preservation and wrap, and lots of services that we have, wonderful community resources to work with them. Many times, the children then aren't allowed to go back home because there needs to be some work done in that family. And so they'll place those children in state custody. And so then as they look for foster care placement or other placement, that child will stay with us. And so today, everybody always asks, well, how many children do you have? Well, today we are taking care of 127 children. Now, when they come through the children's home, if there's 0, to 12, we place them in emergency foster families. So for that 72-hour period, because we find that children in family situations getting kissed on their cheek, tucked in with a teddy bear and a doll is much better for them. A child older than that, they just need a safe place with adults that care, and so they'll stay with us. And so we have about 40 foster care families that will take those children, and I say 0 because we have newborn babies brought in. If a person is giving birth to a child that's already had a child taken away from them for problems, then they automatically will take that child and bring it to the children's home while they do that investigation. Or for example, about a month ago, we had a little baby that was 1 week old and wouldn't stop crying, and the mother picked the child up and threw it to the floor. Well, you know that's not going to quiet the baby, but you can see there's so much anxiety, they didn't know what to do. And so we've been spending some time looking at physicians, nurse practitioners, physician's assistants to help us care for those medically fragile babies. And so we were able to take that child after it was medically cleared, no fractures. You know, the muscles and the bones, they're soft enough that there was just soft tissue damage, but no fractures. But we were able to send it home with a medical provider who said, you know, you'll watch for seizure activity or anything like that. So we're really blessed to have 40 wonderful families that help us with that. Those children can't go anywhere. So whether they're in the foster care or if they're at the children's home, they can't go anywhere. They can't go to Dillon's, they can't go to the park, they can't go to the school, they can't go to the zoo because they don't want them to run into anybody they might know. And so that's wonderful when we can give them to families. So we have that. And then when that child's placed in state custody, they may stay with us. And at the children's home, when you're there, you'll also see an apartment complex that we have on our campus. We have 31 apartments that children that are 16 and older can live in. Now you're thinking, where's the 16-year-old child? Why are they independent? But a lot of times the children that we have, nobody wants, which breaks my heart because they're wonderful children. These children haven't done bad things. Bad things have happened to these children. And so we will start putting them in independent living where we start teaching them about how to care for yourself, how to be that adult, how to go to school, how to get a job, all of those things so they can be successful adults, particularly when they've been broken down. Now, the statistics demonstrate, because when I first got there 2.5 years ago, I was walking around and making rounds, and I saw a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder. So I got into the research. The research demonstrates that children coming out of domestic violence homes are twice as likely to experience PTSD, twice as likely over a returning vet from war. That's because these children are in their own war zone, and they don't know when they're going to get out. And they're traumatized every moment of that day. Where the vet knows my time here is limited and I'm going to get out of it. Our kids don't. So they have PTSD. So what I've done is I've hired therapists, I have hired a nurse, and we're going out there, and as soon as they arrive, we start the healing process with them. Now, a lot of times when those kids show up and they're perfect, you know, those perfect children that I don't know you, I'm going to guard myself, I don't trust you, I'm going to guard myself, and they put up these wonderful walls. Those walls really aren't for them. They're wanting to know if anybody's willing to help tear those down, and we'll tear those down. And then all of a sudden that perfect child starts kind of acting out, and my staff will get a little concerned. Oh, I don't know if we can take this child, Deb. And I'm like, this is where I get excited, because that child now has become their authentic self. And when they show up as their authentic self, then we can start the healing with that. And we can start recognizing their environmental triggers. And you know, one of the most environmental trigger that I'm finding that our kids are having, it's body odor. If they smell somebody with body odor, they'll have an environmental trigger, which means that they want to get up and they want to fight, or they want to flee, or they freeze. And what happens is a lot of times when they're being abused, you work yourself up and you start to sweat. and that child gets that. They don't know, but we're working with these children to identify what those environmental triggers are so that they can recognize it and we can start that healing. And so I'm just really grateful to have that opportunity to help with that, because what I don't want is these children to grow up and be adults that have been abused and traumatized, and they have environmental triggers. And so we work very hard with them. We are also the only one in the state of Kansas that has a unit for sexually trafficked and labor trafficked children. So we are licensed from age 10 to 18. So anybody in the state of Kansas that's picked up as a victim of sexual or labor trafficking, no matter if it's in the Kansas City area, out in western Kansas, they bring them to the children's home. We are our originating state for sexual trafficking. There was a study done in New York that stated 1 out of 8 people picked up for prostitution were from the state of Kansas. So we have a problem right here in our community. Although as I talk with individuals, they'll say, I don't see it. Back in my day, you saw it on Broadway. Now they're back on the social pages and on Backpage and those kinds of things where they're advertising these young ladies. And so about 2.5 years ago, our state statute changed that said if a minor is prostituting, they're not seen as a prostitute, they're seen as a victim of sexual trafficking. And we are going to prosecute those individuals that are selling them. And so we then opened up the doors, and when we moved to our new location, that wasn't in our capital campaign. So I went to Dr. Dakil, and asked if he would write out a check for us to open up the unit. And he gave me the money to facilitate the opening of our unit. So it's called the Shaker Dakil Safe Home, and that's where we manage these children. Those youth will come in, and they have been drugged so they can be sold many, many times a day, 10, 12 times a day. Those girls will come in, and they only are really of their person from their head up, because they've disassociated with their body. And so we try to get them into mindfulness projects where they can learn how to be in the moment. Because children that have been traumatized, they have very racing thoughts. They don't know how to quiet their mind to settle down and just enjoy their time. And so we do yoga, we do mindfulness projects, we do all of these things to help those young ladies and young men. Our sexual trafficking victims have only been women and transgender, and our labor traffic victims have been boys, have been young men. So we have that problem. And I have to say that about a month and a half ago, we had a young lady that was 8 years old that they brought through the unit. She had been trafficked since the age of 1 by her father. Then her father gave her to a neighbor that trafficked her back to the father. She's on our unit playing with dolls. And I have 3 other victims on the unit, and they were so wonderful and kind to her. Can you imagine her trauma and the healing that it's going to take for that young lady? The second night that these kids are on our units, we always make their favorite food. So that night, she decided she wanted boiled shrimp and fudgesicles. So that's an odd combination, but those other 3 victims said, absolutely, shrimp and fudgesicles we're going to have. And they were very kind and loving to her. That's what I see. These children are amazing, amazing. The other night, we had the Martin Luther King Fellowship group of men. They came out and made a meal on Monday night for our youth. And so I was there, and I was walking around, and I was talking to the kids about what's the holidays going to bring for you? What do you want for Christmas? What does that mean to you? And they were talking about our kids are basic needs kids. They want underwear. They want jeans. They'd like a Nike pair of shoes. You know, they're basic things. And so there's this one young man that was in the facility on the day that we moved on February 22nd of last year. We put all the kids on a party bus, drove them over to our brand new facility. We had wrapped it in yellow ribbon, and they all cut the ribbon. And he went onto his unit, and all of a sudden he found me. And my name is known as Miss Debbie, which is the best title I've ever had in my life. Miss Debbie. And he breaks down, and he just lowers his weight onto me. And he said, I don't deserve this place. He had never had it so good that it scared him. What am I supposed to do? And another young man said, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. And I'm like, oh, what's going on? What's happening here? Because I'm kind of hypervigilant with them, like, what's going to happen? And he said, everybody stand and be quiet. And he stood up and he said a prayer to God, thanking us. I couldn't have scripted this any better. That he prayed to God saying, thank you so much for giving us such a beautiful place. And he wanted God to bless all of those that donated to the home so he could have this place to live. And so this young man that lowered all his body weight onto me to say, I don't deserve it. He's been in and out of the children's home several times. He's now there. He's going to turn 18 on Monday. He's going to be released from state custody, and he has no place to go. I'm telling you, you're not going anywhere. You're to stay here until we can find you someplace. And we have a grant for that apartment complex that they can stay up there for 18 months to 2 years. And as soon as that bed opens, that's where he'll go. But he was sharing with me, well, this is what I want for the holiday. Christmas Day, I want to be with family. And I called the Wichita Children's Home staff family. That made me feel good, that I was able to give them staff that care about them, that are attentive listeners and very warm in their receiving. I want to have happiness and I want good food. Okay. All right. Tell me about happiness. Happiness, his description of happiness was, I don't want anybody fighting.
Yeah.
I don't want fighting going on. I said, okay. I said, well, guess what? Your Christmas wish is going to come true because you're going to be here, because on Monday I'm not releasing him. You're going to have happiness because there's no fighting. And you're going to have good food. And you're going to have gifts. And he's like, Debbie, I don't need any gifts. If you're going to make that happen, then I'll have my Christmas wish. I said to him, what is it that you normally do? Tell me about your last Christmas. And he said, my family fights, and I leave my house and I walk the streets to get away from them. So here's a young man that was walking our streets in our community to get away from his family situation that wasn't very kind to him.